Edie Lush, and I'm here in the Hub Culture Pavilion in Davos at the World Economic Forum. Very pleased to be joined by a repeat guest, Salil, Shelty, Secretary General of Amnesty International. You must have been busy recently. Tell me your thoughts after Paris.
Well, I think what the French and the Western governments do in reaction to what happened to Paris will be a real litmus test. Because, you know, there's always a kind of knee-jerk reaction, a public outcry. But it's very important, I think, for leaders to rise above the immediate and to say that we are not going to do what the extremist organizations are doing, but to actually respect human rights. Because in the last 2 weeks, they've already brought in what we think is very unspecific legislation in the so-called defense of terror, and they've arrested almost 70 people. So I think, you know, we don't want to go back to the Guantanamo Bay and Patriot Act kind of behavior, and it's a cycle. It just goes, you know, it just breeds more violence. So I think we have to be very cautious that governments in the West don't behave the same way. And let's not forget that when the US and Europe start taking shortcuts on human rights, there are many developing country governments who use that as an excuse. You know, Turkey, for example, has already closed down one of the main daily newspapers, or started an investigation against a major newspaper, saying, you know, this is religious violence, you know, incitement, etc. So international law is clear. Freedom of expression is central, and of course hate speech is not allowed. But the threshold is high. You can't just shut people up because they say some kind of incitement. It has to be necessary, proportionate. There has to be a clear intent to violence, a real threat. So I think it's a time to be very cautionary, and the report from the Senate in the US about what the CIA has done was a wake-up call. We are launching, Amnesty International launching another report on complicity of European governments, not just Lithuania, Romania, Poland with black sites, but also Germany and UK, etc., who've collaborated with the CIA on taking shortcuts. So I think that's really a real reminder.
So physical shortcuts is one interesting thing. What about the shortcuts that governments are making in terms of the cyber world as well?
It's exactly the same. I mean, we've seen that mass surveillance cannot be a solution, because if you have some real reason to track somebody, it has to be very targeted, and it has to be within a framework of a clear law, clearly formulated law. It has to be necessary and proportionate. So everything I said about the physical side is equally true about the internet and the web. So the presumption is that when it comes to individual privacy, there has to be maximum privacy. When it comes to government behavior, there has to be maximum accountability.
So I want to look away from Paris, look towards northern Nigeria. I know another area. It's a slightly different sort of ball game there, isn't it?
It is and it isn't, because the point I was making for what's happening in France or the West is not that different. Because if you look at northern Nigeria, you know, the cycle of violence is that, of course, what happened, we highlighted what happened with Boko Haram killings and Baga and Doron Baga just in the recent past. But the reason why you're having this reaction in the Northeast is because A, there have been long-term exclusion of the communities there and high levels of poverty, but B, the military, the Nigerian military, has killed you know, thousands of people. Last year, 4,000 civilians have been killed in north of Nigeria. So, you know, and they're mostly young people, and you know, create alienation and anger. So when governments take shortcuts on human rights, it becomes a free-for-all.
Salil, Shelty, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for stopping by the Hub Culture Pavilion here in Davos, and I'm Edie Lush.